in this set is Fran Stallings. Now, Fran is no stranger to this stage either. She's been a member of the Tejas Storytelling Association for a good many years. Tejas, of course, means friendship, and so the association is not just for Texas storytellers and storytelling lovers, but we encompass, well, our neighbors, and so she's from Oklahoma. So she's a close-by neighbor. She, too, has a story in the 40 years of Texas storytelling, and it's a very timely story. And you're going to get to hear it live and in person, because it is the story, the title of the story is the Osage, what is it? The Osage Diamond Ring. And she'll explain all of this to you. But sometimes a voice lingers in your mind as you're reading the words on the page, and I suspect that's what's going to happen as you hear Fran Stallings' story. Come on up, Fran.
Does your town have a ghost walk? Well, Bartlesville, Oklahoma decided years ago they were going to try to do a ghost walk. You know, that's where they have a storyteller in each different site telling a story about some dreadful murder or ghostly vision that has happened in that place, and people just go from one site to another and get to hear the stories. Well, in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, there were some buildings that had histories of haunting and other strange things. In fact, people from the supernatural, whatever it's called, organization in Tulsa, they've been up there with their instruments to try to feel the supernatural vibrations. But they put me in the May jewelry store, and it had no history of anything interesting like that. So I decided, well, I'll just find a folk tale about a haunted gem and I'll adapt it. But I couldn't find one. You'd think. I still haven't found one. So I figured, okay, I'll make one up. Now, ever since we had moved to Bartlesville, I had been hearing rumors about what happened in our neighboring county just to the west, Osage County. This was years and years before David Grann wrote his book, Killers of the Flower Moon, with the movie that finally came out. They were making it for months and months in Osage County, took up every hotel room in Bartlesville with all those people. A lot of our friends were extras. That's going to be a big thing. Tomorrow night, the Oscars, we're rooting for him. But he hadn't even started writing his book then. I found some books, though, in the library, public library history room, and I read up on it. I read up on what had happened in Pawhuska and Gray Horse and Fairfax, towns that we knew in Osage County. And I started putting things together with some bits borrowed from traditional folk tales, and that's the story I'm going to tell you. Charlie O'Donnell was a good-looking young man, had his wits about him, and he figured that he'd seen enough of mud and dirt in the trenches in Europe during the Great War. He didn't like to get his hands dirty. But he figured a smart fella could parlay good looks and wits into a way to make an easy living, and New Orleans, especially when the 20s started to roar, New Orleans was a good place for him to do his things. So he wasn't all that interested when his old Army buddy Bill came by to tell him what he'd just been over to see. He said, Charlie, I was over there in that new state of Oklahoma. I was out there, and they are pumping oil out of the ground. They are pumping money out of the ground. They are making money hand over foot. And I figured you and I, we could maybe get a piece of it. And Charlie said, well, I don't know. Cowboys and blanket Indians, that doesn't sound very interesting to me. And Bill said, oh, Charlie, these are not blanket Indians. Those rich Osage families, they send their sons to Harvard. They send their girls to finish in school in France. They come back and they can parlez-vous, just like those demoiselles we used to see when we were on leave in Paris. They've got their hair cut short and in those Marcel waves. They wear silk stockings and patent leather heels. They wear the latest French fashion. And Charlie, they got their hemlines so short you can see their knees. Well, now that got Charlie's attention. But what do you have in mind, Bill? Think you're going to buy some land and drill for oil? And Bill said, oh, Charlie, you can't buy it. You see, let me tell you, in 1906, just before statehood, they shut down the Osage Reservation that was the whole county, and they divided it all up into these headrights, one for each of the 2,000 plus Osage Indians, and they own the mineral rights. They can sell the surface, but they can't sell the mineral rights. So anybody wants to drill for oil, they can just lease it, but the money from the leases plus 10% of the oil sales, that all gets divided among the whole nation. Charlie said, well, I guess it doesn't amount to too much per person. And Bill said, are you kidding? 1921, each one got about $10,000 per head right, and some people have more than one. If somebody died in the great influenza, they might have 3 or 4 head rights. Well, folks, $10,000 in 1921 was about equal to $1 million nowadays, so you can imagine the money that was poured. The Osages were the richest people in the world per capita back in that time. Charlie said, well, what do you think we're going to do if we can't pump oil? We're going to go in the dry good business and sell silk stockings or something? And Bill said, well, no, I've seen those Stutz Bearcats and those Pierce Arrow touring cars, those big cars. You remember what we learned in the motor pool? Cars break down. I figured we could just open a mechanic shop. Well, Charlie looked at the dirty grit under Bill's nails, and he wasn't all that interested, but he was already coming up with an idea of his own. After Bill left, Charlie got to work, shut down his various operations in New Orleans. He called in loans, he cashed out property, he had some new suits made, nothing flashy, custom made shirts and silk ties, soft silk, just a little bit colorful, new shoes, new hat, all the latest fashion. Bought himself a one-way ticket to Pahasco on the train, and then he took all the money that was left over, every red cent, and he bought a diamond engagement ring. Now, that's no new idea to us these days, but it was in the 1920s. Before that time, any ring in the family, any kind of ring would serve for an engagement, but the diamond engagement ring was the latest thing, and that's what Charlie wanted. He had plans. He rode the train into Pahasco, and as he came into Osage County, he saw those oil derricks thick as porcupine quills on the hills. They rolled into Pawhuska, and my stars, there were skyscrapers 6 and 7 stories high. Shiny storefronts, those big cars he saw in the streets, yes indeed, and there were those Osage girls. Yes, indeed. He settled in and he began to mix in the best company. Of course, he went to Immaculate Conception Catholic Church up on the hill. It was already famous for its custom-made European stained glass windows that had pictures of Osage people as well as others you can still go see them. He went to the Constantine Theater not to see the moving picture shows, that was too tacky. No, he only went to the best musical productions. And that's how he met Maggie Running Horse. She was the only child of a widower of the best Osage clans. And Maggie was pleased with his doting attention. He wrote poems for her. He brought her flowers. And he very politely went to meet her father and ask permission to pay court. Now, Papa Running Horse wasn't all that pleased. There were some Osage youth he had his eye on for his daughter Maggie, but she begged and begged. He was so cosmopolitan. He had been in Europe. He looked so handsome. And so Papa agreed. And they were seen everywhere in Pawhuska at all the best houses. They went to the evening soirees. They went to the music. And after a while, Charlie went to Papa and asked permission to get engaged to his daughter. Well, Maggie was delighted with the ring, but her papa wasn't so sure. Let me take that ring to Bartlesville and have the May Company look at it. So the next day, he drove into Bartlesville and he showed the jeweler this ring. I think it's glass. But the jeweler used it to scratch a pane of glass and then a pane of steel. He looked at it with a magnifier and saw no flaw. It's genuine, he said. This is the real deal. It's a handsome diamond. Well, if the ring was on the level, maybe Charlie was too. So begrudgingly, Papa Running Horse agreed to the engagement. And he planned as his wedding present, he built them a new house. Not the stone and brick mansions that you can still see on Grand Avenue in Pawhuska. This was just a little 3-story frame Victorian, but it had all the latest amenities. Indoor running water and plumbing, electric lights that even had one of those mechanical refrigerators. And Maggie spent weeks and weeks happily decorating it in time for their spring wedding. In fact, they even had the wedding reception at the house. And that's where Maggie said, "Now, Charlie, I want you to meet my cousin Elaine. She's just back from France. You know, she's the last one in her family. She lost her parents and her brothers and her sister in the influenza. The nuns raised her and they sent her overseas. She's just come back to Fairfax. I want you to be nice to her." And Charlie was very nice to Cousin Elaine. Well, as young marrieds, they joined the social swirl in Pawhuska in those days. It was really quite something. And after a few months, when Maggie began having some digestive troubles, the Pawhuska ladies looked knowingly at one another and figured she was in a family way. But her Osage aunties were kind of puzzled about the fact that she didn't have her stomach upsets on waking in the morning. It always took at least an hour or so after breakfast. That was strange. Charlie was concerned about her. He did all the cooking for her himself, made her delicate poached eggs on toast, and always brought her that special coffee he'd learned to make in New Orleans, that bitter chicory coffee. She liked it half and half with hot milk in the French style. Even when she didn't eat a bite of anything else, she always had a cup of that coffee. But it usually came up afterward, and she couldn't eat much lunch or much supper either. She got pale. Her beautiful hair began to fall out, and I'm afraid that by the end of the summer, barely 6 months after her wedding, she was in her coffin. The undertaker had done a good job with makeup and a wig, and there she was in her favorite pale silk dress, almost as beautiful as she'd been before. And as Charlie looked down at her in the coffin, he realized she was still wearing that diamond engagement ring. And he had plans for it. Cousin Elaine. What was he going to do? He threw himself down on, oh, my dear, my darling, how could I? And under cover of his body slipped the ring off her emaciated finger and had it in his hand when Papa Running Horse tapped him on the shoulder. Control yourself, boy, the priest is here. And he saw a hand reach out to him in a lacy cassock sleeve. He couldn't shake the hand. He had his ring. It would look funny if he put it in his pocket. So, oh, my darling, and his sobs covered the gulp as he swallowed it. The priest said, there, my boy, this will pass. And he thought, I'll be very careful. That night, a thunderstorm blew in across the prairie. The wind knocked out the electric power, so Charlie took a kerosene lantern up to the bedroom along with a snifter of brandy, climbed into bed and settled down, trying to think ahead. How long would it be before he could start paying court to Cousin Elaine? She would surely want to comfort a bereaved bridegroom. The wind coming in through the window blew the pale curtains, and the sound of the wind seemed to be saying, my diamond ring, give me back my diamond. Oh, no, it's just nerves. He drank his brandy. He lit an expensive cigar, and every time he inhaled, the glow of the end of the cigar seemed to light the room and show him coming a pale figure toward him. My diamond ring, give me back my diamond ring. Closer and closer it came until he lost his nerve and leaped out of bed, knocking over the kerosene lantern and dropping his cigar in the spilled kerosene. Well, the next morning, they found his bones in the ashes of the house, but they never found the ring. Teenagers like to go to the ruins, especially on a dark night. All that's left standing is the brick chimney. But if there's a little wind, you might hear it blowing, seeming to say, my diamond ring, my diamond ring. Now I've got my diamond ring.